The current presidential election is gearing up to be one for the history books. With Trump's legal battles, Biden's impeachment talks, and RFK Jr.'s struggle to even get on the ballot, the political landscape is more intense than ever. Join me as I break down all 50 states' polls to uncover what the future holds for the Oval Office and the White House. Now, before we dive in, please subscribe to our channel and help us get to 1,000 subscribers. Now, with no further ado, let's check out the map. Both parties anticipate winning by a margin of 9% or more, based on the historical trends and recent polls. Starting off in the West, Donald Trump and the Republicans are set to dominate in Idaho, Utah, Wyoming with a whopping 53%, along with Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and as well as Alaska. Now, Nebraska is leaning mostly red, but its 1st and 3rd districts are still up for grabs. While Omaha is leaning towards Biden, in the East, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina are all pretty much easy points for Trump, leaving little to no room for the current president. This gives the Republican Party a total of 125 votes, needing an additional 145 more to secure their victory. Still, though, in the West, Biden is holding strong in California, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Colorado. If we move to the East, Illinois, New York, Vermont, D.C., New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, Connecticut, Delaware, and Maryland are solidly Democratic. On top of that, New Mexico and Virginia, even though they're both potentially close, are quite unlikely to be contested by the Trump campaign, since they have aided Biden's victory back in 2020, including Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. The current president starts with a secure initial vote tally of 209 in total, giving him an 88-vote lead over Trump and leaving him just barely 61 votes shy of securing a 2nd victory. But where does RFK Jr. stand in these states, and how does he influence the other candidates? RFK Jr.'s impact is even evident in his polling averages, which range from 11.7% to 7.7%, according to a couple of different sources. Notably, RFK Jr.'s impact is also evident on the ballot battlefield. He is reportedly eligible in 8 states: Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, and Utah, with petitioning campaigns underway in nearly all of the remaining states. Access to the ballot is crucial for candidates outside the 2 major parties, and RFK Jr.'s progress in this area is significant. However, it's still too early to determine if he'll emerge as a major candidate or not. Will he be a force to be reckoned with? Time will tell. With most of the states being accounted for, only 14 of them are left up for grabs. Half of these lean towards one candidate. However, I would say that flipping them isn't entirely impossible. The states with the lowest margins and the most uncertainty include Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, and also Wisconsin. Now let's dive into the latest polls from each of these 14 states to determine the frontrunner and assess RFK Jr.'s impact. Before we dive into the key battleground states, we gotta take a look at where the other 7 states, Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, Florida, Ohio, New Hampshire, and Maine, are leaning. Now, in Texas, Trump won by 9% back in 2016, but that margin decreased to 5% in 2020. The most recent poll by the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation predicts that the former president will win by 12%, with 46% for Trump, 34% for Biden, and 9% for Kennedy. Texas is currently leaning Republican, granting Trump an additional 40 Electoral College votes. A state that Trump won in the past 2 elections, Iowa, has no polls that include RFK Jr. yet. Recent polls with just the 2 major party candidates show that Trump is leading by 9%, bringing him even closer to 270 electoral votes. Now moving on, in Minnesota, a state won by the Democrats not only in 2016 but also in 2020, the most recent polling data including Kennedy dates back to November last year, showing Biden leading over Trump by a very thin margin of 0.4%. However, most recent polls excluding Kennedy shows Biden leading with 44% to 42%, adding 10 votes in favor of the Democratic Party, totaling 219 electoral votes. Now, let's move on over to the Sunshine State. Florida appears to have solidified its Republican lean in recent years, throwing away its former swinging trend. The recent polls consistently show a significant Trump lead, with average polling at 10% or more. The latest poll indicates Trump at 49.2%, Biden at 34.6%, and Kennedy at 6.1%, making it very likely that Florida's 30 electoral college votes will go towards Trump. Now, Ohio has also voted for Trump in the last two elections. Now, reflecting this trend, recent polls show a substantial margin that is in favor of Trump. Polls also fluctuate in Kennedy's percentage, with the most recent showing 4.6% and the previous ones indicating almost 3 times as much at 13%. However, Kennedy's absence from the ballot may contribute to this variation. Nonetheless, Trump leads by double digits in almost every poll, firmly placing Ohio in the hands of the Republicans. Now moving northeast, New Hampshire stands as the second-to-last leaning state that has historically voted for the Democrats. However, this state also lacks polling data involving Kennedy, even though he's qualified for the ballot. Just like Iowa, looking at some more recent primary polls, Biden leads over Trump in New Hampshire by 52% versus 45%, giving the current president a 7-point lead and securing him another 4 points. Now, moving on to the last leaning state, Maine. It stands out as the second state that is expected to be split. Very similar to Nebraska, actually. Statewide polling data shows a significant majority in favor of Biden, with an 8-point lead granting the Democratic Party another point. However, I do want to point out that the second district in Maine, where Trump holds a 20-point lead, adds another point to his tally. And with that, we're going to wrap up and shift our focus to the states that could drastically alter the election's outcome. The Battleground states. Now, the Battleground states are super important for 2 reasons. They hold the power to decide the winner. Very simple. But they also reveal the true impact of the Kennedy campaign. They will truly determine if he's a genuine contender or not. In the last election cycle, swing states included the 5 that Trump won: Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. And the 8 that Biden won: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, ultimately securing his victory. Now, for the current year, let us start off with Nevada. According to the recent polls by the Wall Street Journal, Trump leads with 37% against Biden's 33%. With Kennedy following closely behind with his largest margin yet, 15%. Now, based on these polls, it seems quite clear that Nevada is leaning Republican, with Trump just 1 electoral college vote behind Biden, with 225 compared to 226 electoral college votes. Now, just southeast of Nevada resides Arizona, which is our second swing state. While voting Republican back in 2016, they flipped to blue back in 2020. However, based on the recent polls, Arizona seems to be favoring Trump with a lead ranging from 3 to 8 points. Kennedy's impressive average turns out to be 10%, which suggests a significant impact. But nonetheless, as of the moment, Arizona is leaning Republican, granting Trump an additional 11 points. Now moving on to Wisconsin, another state that suddenly flipped from red to blue in 2020, shows much closer polls. Trump leads by merely 1.6% based on 12 polls, with Kennedy averaging about 8.2%, indicating his influence in this tightly contested state. While it is too early and close to call, the data slightly favors the Republican Party, potentially giving Trump 10 more additional votes. Now, next up, Michigan, offering a total of 15 electoral votes. This is a close state, which also switched sides in the last 2 elections, and sees Trump holding a slight lead over Biden by an average of 2.6% based on 19 polls. Kennedy's presence, polling at 10.2%, adds to the contest. This closes the edge in favor of the Republican and grants Trump 15 more additional votes, leaving him just 9 points away from 270 in total. Now, in our final 3 states, Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, the current president, Biden, will need all 3 in order to secure victory and prevent Trump from reaching 270 electoral votes. Starting off with Georgia, where Trump is leading by 5% based on 17 polls, with 43.4% compared to Biden's 38.4%. Kennedy maintains his average at about 7.5%, tilting the state slightly towards red and managing to push Trump over the 270 mark. In North Carolina, we see a similar trend with Trump leading by 4.1% based on 17 polls. Kennedy maintains a solid average of 9.1%, ranging from 12% to 1.5%. And last but not least, Pennsylvania. The latest poll, including Kennedy, shows the current president leading by 3 points with 44% compared to the former president, Trump's 41%, with Kennedy falling behind with 7%. Interesting thing to note, though, 4% of the voters voted none of the above. However, this lead is not sufficient for the Democratic Party to win, though, putting them just at 245 projected votes, while compared to the Republicans' current projection of 293 votes. Now, it's quite evident that RFK Jr.'s presence is heavily impacting the election and seemingly favoring Trump, with many swing states that are showing clear signs of a Republican lean. Now, based on the most recent polls, however, the 2024 presidential election map concludes with Joe Biden totaling at 245 votes, losing to the former president, Donald Trump, with a total of 293 votes. Well, yeah, November is still many months away, and there's of course much that can happen between now and then, which would be more polling, campaigning, and of course, voting. However, I do think it's important to note that social media can have a big impact on the elections and voting. Scandals and leaks often surface online, exposing hidden acts and testimonies by candidates. These revelations have obviously happened before and have made big headlines. They can sway public opinion, influence voter perceptions, and even shape the course of the election. And as of the moment, information spreads super rapidly and widely nowadays. And social media platforms play a big role in shaping political discourse and driving voter engagement. Therefore, it is essential to consider the influence of social media when analyzing the dynamics of an election. Nonetheless, as I wrap up and conclude the video, the potential victory seems to reside in the hands of the former president, Donald J. Trump.